So Eric will be on in a second. He's actually doing some of the book starter stuff with one of our authors like right now. So he'll be on in like 5-10 minutes. No rush. But in the meantime, I think we should do a little around the horn, talk about how we're feeling. Something that Eric and I have been talking about lately is that we're thinking about pushing back the manuscript deadline from February 18th to February 25th. I mean, like I'm personally in favor of that, and I'm sure most of you guys are too. But let's just go around the horn. Just say how you're feeling with everything. If you're feeling comfortable, if you're feeling uncomfortable, and yeah, if you want the deadline pushed back a week. So I guess we'll start in the order I see on the Zoom chat. So we'll go Randy first.
Hey guys, so I'm definitely in favor of the moving it to the 25th.
Yeah.
Right now I feel like I'm still in a solid spot, maybe a little bit behind. I had trouble finding a structure, but I finally found a chapter one that worked, and I've been able to piece together my stories so far. Now I just kind of need to fill in some of the bullets and make everything work a bit more cohesively. And then I'm still working on the introduction stuff as well.
Awesome. Great. And Peyton, just to catch up to speed, we're going to do a little around the horn while we're waiting for Eric. And then and tell me if you're in favor of moving back the deadline for the manuscript a week. So we'll go to Katie next. O'Connell, yeah.
Hello. So I had a good chat with Akeisha, who's my developmental editor, last night, and kind of helped me think through how I want my structure to look like. And what I was really struggling with was I didn't really think that my book would be like kind of a traditional chapter structure, but like kind of a compilation of short stories. So I'm going to continue to run with that. And I kind of ran it by Eric today, and he thinks it's going to be a good move. So I have a lot of writing that I still want to do, but I think like generally I just need to order my stories. And I feel like I'm in an okay place, but the extension would totally help out.
Yeah, great. Awesome. So we'll go to Kate next. Kate Owens.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with everyone else. I finally found a structure that's been helpful for me. So now I really just have to organize everything into chapters and as well as keep writing. So a deadline push would actually be very helpful as well.
All right. Awesome. Now we'll go to Julia.
Hi. I've been doing pretty well so far. There's a lot I want to change already from the edits, but manuscript-wise, just having the chapters done, I feel like I am doing at least one every 2 days and trying to crank those out a little bit. So an extension would be good because then I could go back, look over, and actually make the changes I want to without rushing, because I was just thinking like I'll get it all done and I'll turn it in for the first draft, but now I could actually internalize and look over everything, so that would help a lot.
Yeah, awesome. And also just to clarify something, we have a very, very long revision process. So yeah, I mean, looking over is great too, but just let you know, you'll have that chance later too. We'll go to Alex.
Hey, so just like everybody else, I think I'd be in favor of pushing it a week back. I've been doing just kind of the chapter structuring and everything, and I felt like still like a little bit behind, but moving along on the right track. So hopefully it'll be there soon enough.
Yeah, awesome. Great. And then we'll go with Peyton, the last one on the Zoom chat.
Yo, yeah, things are going great. I was actually really excited because this morning I finally reached the 20,000 word mark. So
hey, good for you.
It felt good to cross that line and
congrats.
kind of catch up in a way.
Mm-hmm.
My stories have gotten a lot longer as well. Like my first story was 950 words, and now they're getting into like the 2000s. So that's pretty cool as well, and it's helpful to get to that word mark. But when it comes to the chapters, things are going great. I found my structure that I love to use, Malcolm Gladwell Outliers, and I've been powering through chapter with chapter, doing that. I think I have 4 more to go, and they're going to be harder because I haven't really written any stories for those chapters yet, but I'm going to be doing that in the coming weeks, and I'm 1 week behind, so that extra extension would be helpful.
Yeah, great. And then it's just Luca and I in the live chat, so I'll turn it over to him. Just tell how you're feeling, Luca.
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I haven't really done much work since I got back from the break. But I have like a nice chapter outline, which I like. and yeah, that should be nice. But yeah.
Well, I'll tell him that. I'm assuming we'll probably extend it. Like, I don't see why we wouldn't. So keep that in mind now. It'll probably be due the 25th. That's like the last Tuesday in February or Monday in February, I think, something like that. And then after that, we'll start diving into the publishing side of it. So Brian will start being a little bit more involved. Brian Beese, you might have met him a long time ago, and he's been doing your pre-approval calls. But yeah, he'll be coming into the fold. And then also this week, I think Thursday or Friday, keep this on your radar. We might have to push it back because Brian's been a little bit slow in planning this, but we might do like a war room session. I'm not exactly sure what that means. They haven't really told me much, so I think we are going to push it back. But it'll basically be like working on some publishing stuff. And then so on a wait for Eric, I guess he'll be here pretty soon, hopefully, so hold tight. But another thing we were also thinking about, we get your input on this, is potentially having the publishing event like the either the last week or the first weekend of, or the last weekend of June or the first weekend of July. So like the 6th of July. Is anybody like already like I absolutely can't do that?
I have a wedding on the weekend, like in the beginning of July, but I could probably be back. It's in Ohio, so maybe I could just make it from there, but that's the only conflict I have.
Okay, great. Also fun fact, July 6th actually turns out to be my birthday, so that might will be a little celebration. That was unintentional. Yeah, thanks, Peyton. Yeah, but I mean, I think that might be. I don't plan on it yet. We'll let you know probably after the manuscripts are submitted, but just keep that a little bit in mind. So when you're like getting internships and stuff or doing whatever. But yeah, so I guess sit tight. Eric will be here in a second. Sorry about this. He's just doing a little bit of content creation. I'll try and text him, see where he's at.
Is it still snowing out there in Georgetown?
No, but like it's cold as shit. Like what, like 20 degrees?
Yeah,
it's bad. Yeah, it's really windy too. But what about California, Peyton?
California's pretty well. I mean, I'm experiencing the same wind as you are and the same coldness. It actually got so windy up here in the mountains that a tree, this huge tree just broke over at our campfire area, and it kind of destroyed a bunch of benches. Because I'm like living at a summer camp practically, so there's just a bunch of trees and campfires. So it was wild. So a lot of wind as well.
That is pretty wild.
not as cold though, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
California. But when does it start getting warmed up over there? When does
what, like March-ish? Yeah, like March sometime. Sorry, I was just texting Eric. Probably like late March. It'll start to get a little warmer. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully after spring break, that'll be ideal. I mean, it won't matter. I'll be in my room writing all day long. So, time, So
I missed you around the horn. How are you doing so far?
Oh yeah, okay. My around the horn. I'm doing good. I had a ridiculous week the last week. I had like 20 plus meetings in like 5 days for just miscellaneous stuff. So that was pretty like freaking terrible. But that's done now. And this week I'm gonna probably be writing quite a bit. Yeah. Nice. Thanks for keeping me on track.
I'm just a team player, you gotta see how the team's doing.
Yeah, I gotcha.
That's all. Did you hit 20,000 words already? Did you already hit all that?
Yeah. I did that in the story phase.
Gosh, it must have felt so good.
Yeah.
I'm on a whole nother level right now.
It feels pretty good. I mean, I don't know. In some ways, like we want you not to think about this as an assignment, but it still feels like that in some ways. But like once you write 20,000, like most of the hard work's done. Putting into like the chapters is a lot of just like pull and plug. So that's the difficult part, in my opinion. Some people get really like in their chapters.
It's nice having the fluff, All I feel like I need is a little bit of research and lessons and, just kind of arguments to plug in there. And I feel like I'm good to go. I'm ready for publishing.
Yeah, I feel that. Once again, sorry about this. I hope he's here within the next 5 minutes. Yeah, just sit tight, everybody. Eric.
Hey, how is it,
How's
Carson?
How's it going, Eric?
Good, good, good. Thank you very much.
No problem. I was talking to these guys. It all sounds like we're in favor of pushing back the deadline a week. So I think we should probably do that.
Success. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
No one's like, please, I want to have less time to do my manuscript.
Yeah. Honestly.
Cool. Awesome. Well, good. Well, I don't know. Maybe before we dive in, we're going to talk about kind of the last piece tonight, which is sort of the hook of your introduction and those sorts of pieces. But before we do, anyone have any like burning questions they want to ask about the process, about where they're at, how they're approaching it, and these sorts of things that I can answer as you're in this? Because sort of what I've learned to do so far is this is our sort of last session that we'll have where there's any kind of instruction. Everything else is then sort of just like, sort of you'll just do, right? So your editors are there to help and these sorts of things, but I won't harass you in terms of like making you spend an hour with me unless you really want to. But any kinds of questions that people have before we?
I think Kate had a question in the chat.
Yeah, I answered it. I'll talk to her after the meeting. Thanks, Peyton.
Okay. Any other questions at all? Yeah, the thing that I'll share with you really quickly is just over the next month of time that you're creating, just number one, just it's better to have something done than something finished, right? So what I mean by that is done is like, this is done, Eric, please review it, give me feedback, and let's go from there. So like, it won't be finished, right? Like it's not finished for a while, but try and land the plane, right? Get the plane down, and so we can basically, make it better, make it polished. So, but yeah, set that as a target. And again, if you're like not as far along as you want, you have chapters that are, I call them holy chapters with like pieces that are apart, things you need to write. That's fine. Don't stress on it. The most important thing I think is to sort of get it to a point where you can land it and move forward. So cool. All right. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to spend time kind of on the last piece of the introduction that I really want you guys to sort of focus on, which is the concept of the hook. Now, the hook is basically one of those things that I would say people, it tends to be one of those things that I spend quite a bit of time trying to help the author really nail this one, because it tends to be that when people forget that the single most important sort of like content of your book is actually those first 5 paragraphs in your introduction. That's it. It's the biggest thing that you're going to kind of capture the reader and grab their attention. Because what oftentimes people think about is they assume that the reader is basically going to read the entire book and like go through and finish the whole thing. Instead, what you need to realize is that basically the reader is constantly looking for a reason to stop reading your book. So there's places along the way where you're going to lose them. They're going to basically pick this thing up and decide the introduction of like, should I keep reading this thing? So you've got a lot of chances where your reader might decide other things are more interesting. And so one of the most important things is nailing the hook. Now, what is the hook? Well, the hook is basically, we talked about sort of doing hooks before, which is these compelling places. So tonight what we're going to do is spend some time actually like trying to map out what you think are some of the stories that could be the most interesting stories. And so we're kind of going to take you through a little bit of a workshop, similar to what we did with some of the book title brainstorming sessions to do. I'm going to take you through a few things. So I want each of you to open up a quick document and call it, you can either do it in your chat, your folder or whatever, but call it a hook brainstorming. Because I'm going to basically walk you through some ideas of brainstorming, and then you're going to break up into groups for a few minutes and talk about what your hook is. Now, again, the reason this is really a critical one is, honestly, it's the reason that I think people will decide this is compelling or good. And I think many times people wrestle to find it, but they typically will come from one of three places. One is they'll come from a personal story of yours that you really want to tell that is your personal story, this one. Two, it'll be something that is one of those sorts of, it's like a news story. It's kind of newsy, facty in that sort of way. And three, it'll be something that kind of is typically from a secondary story. Very rarely do I find these hooks come from an interview that you had. Maybe it will, but typically they come from one of those three places. So we're going to walk through kind of an exercise here to brainstorm your hook in this way. So, all right, so here's what the first one I want you to do. I want you to basically start with the phrase in there, the word best. I want you to think about what are the three absolute best stories that you've got in your entire book so far. They could be personal stories, they could be interview stories, or secondary stories. But what are the three best stories that you've got in the entire book? Because oftentimes the easiest, simplest thing to do may be to take your absolute best story and pull it into the very front. So write down your three, just some summary notes of what are your three best stories that you have. And again, don't worry about length, don't worry about anything other than like, all right, what are the three best stories that you think are in this book, even if they're not written best yet, but you just think could eventually be the best stories. All right, so underneath that one, I want you to write the word failure. All right, so one of the things, and again, I'm going to talk, for Julia's book about vulnerability, this will be ring most true. Oftentimes, a very good place to start for a personal story is in some way describing some kind of a failure or a challenge or some sort of a personal story that is an emotionally sort of negative one that you want to lead with. So these are things, I almost dropped out of school, or something happened with a death or an injury or some kind of a failure. Leading with one of those can oftentimes be very powerful as well. So I want you to write down three moments of failures, and again, they can be personal failures that you've had. These could be failures where you observe them with other people in your book, other stories, other things you might just like to include. But three stories that could be to do with failures that are powerful emotional ones. Again, they can be personal failures, other failures that you interview people or research in there that are big ones too. Something that is a failure. And again, we won't position this as a negative failure, but as a learning failure in that way. So what are the three biggest failures? So these are, again, an opportunity to be vulnerable oftentimes when you do this. All right, the next one, I want you to write the word big name. And underneath it, I want you to list out sort of the 3 biggest names that you see in the book or that you'd like to include in the book. So for example, if you think it would be awesome to include a story, if you're working on startups like Carson, a Steve Jobs story, an Elon Musk story, or who those ones would be. Who are the biggest names that you could include a story about that might really cement this as a big thing, right? Someone in that direction. So, who is the biggest names that either you think would be great to reference in your book one way or another, right? For Randy, maybe it's talking about Elon Musk and a bullying story, right? That could be it. But who are the names that you would like to, again, name drop? Again, it could be stories that are either secondary story or first person primary interviews, but either one, who are those folks? The 3 biggest names in some way that you might drop. So the next one underneath that one, I want you to list the word or the phrase news event. So I want you to think about what are the biggest news events. They're actually, news. This would be reported on, breaking news or whatever it is that you think you could potentially reference in your book that would be illustrative of what's going on, right? So for Peyton, maybe it could be the salmonella outbreak that shut down Chipotle across the country, right? Or something like that. It's a food related one. Or Alex, it could be the shuttering of a famous restaurant chain or whatever it may be, right? What's the biggest sort of news story that you could lead with that could be an interesting, related thing? Again, you might not have something exactly, but what is a newsy story that is sort of like, again, breaking news that would be an important one to share? All right, the next one I want you to write is I want you to write the phrase history, or the word history. And under it, I want you to write, any examples of bigger historical events that might be related. So these could be things like, for example, Amber wrote about, in her book, she led off with the story of the Dutch overcoming the French and the English to become one of the dominant seafaring nations of the 1500s, right? So they're big historical events that might be something that you could relate, that you could tie in, that are interesting, right? Like, for example, Katie, is there an event like Woodstock that you could talk about, right? Like it's a historical event that happened in the future that could provide context now, something historical that could be really powerful. All right, and the last one is I want you to write the word stats, right? Or data. You can write stats or data. Are there any really powerful sort of numbers or just data that you believe is just big and kind of illustrates the problem, right? So Franklin led off the story of his with just a number of his hook tied into this concept of how much money we're losing due to productivity due to sleep deprivation of workers. So are there any big stats that you think really, really matter and sort of would mean something for you? Now, you're likely to be adding to these things as you continue to go. You might be thinking of these things. But here's the cool part about what you just did. you should find a way to pretty much incorporate every single one of these things in your book somehow, right? All of these things, as you're brainstorming them, are interesting. They're relevant pieces that you might think fit. So if something about history is interesting, or something about current events or news, all of these things may have places that they live somewhere in your manuscript, because in this brainstorming exercise, you thought they were important. So that's important to sort of know in this regard. But one of them is going to be the one that you believe is sort of the signature one you want to lead off the book with. Now, again, you may not know it, and you may not even find it in this process. It may be something that we brainstorm. I would say only about 40% of people, or maybe a little less, the hook that they write in their first draft introduction is the one we go with. So you may very well be wrong, but I think there's an opportunity for you to do something big. So again, what you saw in this sort of list of things are a bunch of different opportunities to think about things that you could lead the book off with. So what I think you guys should do now is sort of break up into groups a little bit and share some of the ways you think you could lead off the book. What are some of the different ways that you're most compelled by? So spend a couple minutes going through and identify maybe 2 to 3 of the things that are the most interesting that you might like to lead off the book with. Again, you don't have to write it up for now. You're just going to put this down as sort of the leader. And remember, part of the interesting thing as we write our introduction is you're going to take that sort of like story, and you'll most likely weave it into your introduction in a couple different places. So if it's a longer story, you might pull that whole story up into the very front and sort of weave it around there. I find that about 25 or to 30% of the time, there's a story that's somewhat buried in the book to pull it forward in that way. So that's one of the things that we'll do under that regard. So questions on these sorts of like little brainstorming exercise here to sort of think of these things. Any questions that people have on these elements that could be the story that leads off the book there? Any questions from anyone? So Carson, my advice here is to sort of then break the room up into little groups here, and in pairs or in groups of 3, and have everyone sort of talk through their hook, just what it could be. Now, again, what I would urge you to think about is that most of these items that you find are interesting are important. So they may be hooks for chapters that you wind up doing. They may be pieces. You'll find that this list of things that you think are most powerful will probably live somewhere in the start of chapters or inside chapters already. But see if you can brainstorm what you think might be the story or the sort of the thing to lead off the entire book with.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. It might add you to a room, Eric, but you can just leave. But
I'm gonna bounce out of here too. I got a call to jump on, but I'll let you guys do your thing here then and do it.
All right, sounds good.
All right, guys. Good luck on the push. I'll keep checking in on everyone over these next kind of couple weeks here, but you got this. We're gonna do this thing, and remember, lower your expectations. Shitty and done is still done. So remember, just get something across the line that you can get feedback on and we can make into something much better. Cool?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Bye, guys. See you all next week. I'll see you guys soon.
Yeah. All right. So we'll take like 5-10 minutes. We'll do that, and then we'll call it a day. Just work on your hooks. Let me know if you have any questions. There you go. Sorry. I'm gonna stop recording.